Hi everyone, I'm Matt, and once a week I do world building techniques, tricks, and tips. And today we are having our second interview with an author, and we're going to be talking about writing and author brand and all sorts of wonderful things with Megan Haskell. Megan, would you like to introduce yourself? Because I totally did not say that you have to introduce yourself, but hey.
No, we're good. We're good. Yeah, so I'm Megan Haskell. I write portal fantasy adventures featuring strong female heroines. I'll give you my tagline because I think we're going to talk about that. So my tagline for my author brand is escape into myth, magic, and mayhem.
Nice
And
alliteration.
I thought so. I know you like alliteration. I like
I
alliteration too. So, and Megan adds to that whole theme.
Megan does.
So yeah. So, and then I have, I'm also co-founder of the Author Wheel, which is a podcast and website for writers. We teach courses on everything from, basic writing productivity through how to plan a novel and do some world building, and into we're getting started now with an author strategy section as well, which is where the tagline comes in.
And don't forget to mention the Kickstarter.
Yes, yeah. So as we're recording this on Wednesday, April 12th at 8 p.m., which is why my light is terrible. Sorry.
You're the only one who cares.
Well, that's good, I guess. Anyway, yeah. So next week, the Author Wheel is launching a Kickstarter for what will be an omnibus paperback of our 3 quick guides. That was a mouthful. Basically, what we're doing is we've written these 3 short little topical guides. One is on author productivity. The second one is on understanding your genre. And then the third one is planning a novel. And what we mean by that is more of the brainstorming, idea generation, world building, all the things you need to do before you actually start writing the novel. And then we're adding in this brand new section on author strategy. So those 4 mini books are going to be combined into a full-length paperback. And then we're creating courses for each of those sections. So the Kickstarter goes live next week. I think on Tuesday is what we're planning. So Tuesday the 18th. I think that's the right date, something like that.
No.
I should have a calendar in front of me. But Tuesday the 18th, it goes live. We've got some early bird discounts, and it's going to be really cool. I'm really excited about the project. I think it's something that I wish I'd had access to when I first started writing.
That's the world building where it came from. It was, like, hey, how come no one has done this before? Like, man, I really could have used that. And, I like how we're giving back. That's what we're gonna say that we're doing, right?
No, it's true. I mean, yeah, of course we hope to make some money on it as well, but no, I think it is a lot of that's where it kind of comes from, is the idea of giving back to the community and teaching the things that we've learned along the way. I mean, I know that's true for the Author Wheel. Greta and I both feel like we've learned so much, and we want to share what we've learned in a very concise way, so that our tagline for Author Wheel is keep your stories rolling, because that's what we want to do. We want to help authors who are stuck or, struggling to get that book out there and get it finished and done.
On a scale of 1 to 10, that is a 10 of 10 tagline for. I mean, that's good.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Highly impressed. Yeah. and one of the cool things I think you should point out is that it's not just indie, it's not just trad. You've got stuff from both of them.
Yep.
Authors from both sides of the divide that we have for some reason.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's true. In fact, that's how Greta and I came together in the first place. I don't know if you know this, maybe you do. I can't remember. But so Greta and I originally met at the Southern California Writers Conference, and we both had our first novels ready to go at about the same time. She went traditional. So her first series, it's the 7 Deadly Sins murders, and they're like domestic suspense thrillers is what they are. And so she got a 7-book deal or 3-book deal with right of first refusal on the rest for 7 books, with a small press. So she went traditional. Meanwhile, I've always been indie, always wanted to be indie. I have actually a business background. I have a degree from USC in undergraduate business, and I worked in corporate America for a while, and well, for a while, for 7 years before I had kids. So that was always my dream, was to be running my own business and doing my own thing and doing it my way, and letting my type A personality shine. um, and so we became friends, and then, okay, I'll be honest, we wanted to get free entry free to the conference a few years later. We just wanted the free ticket. So we're like, let's put together a course and teach, how to do both. Like, how do you decide which way you want to go? How do you decide if you want to be traditional, or how do you decide if you want to go indie? What are your strengths that you need and your weaknesses, that you can alleviate in the two different paths? Because there are reasons to go both ways, either way. It all depends on you and goals and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish and what you want for your future and your lifestyle, and all those things factor in. So we taught a course on it, and then we wrote a book on it, and then we revised that book and revised it again. So now it's published right there. Take Charge of Your Author Career, which is the second edition, but actually the third version, because the original one was titled, speaking of alliteration, Aspiring to Author.
Oh, yeah, that's a mouthful.
Yeah. We thought we were very clever. It didn't sell.
14 Fantasy Realms. I mean, like, yeah, it was like no one knows what that means. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I mean, I do, but then I know you and I write fantasy. So there you go.
One of the reasons I brought that up is because it is pretty interesting and well done, because you ask an indie author like myself, like, go indie. Like, why would anyone do this? But I came from a place where I didn't want to wait on anyone ever again. I didn't want to go through the production. I mean, I had gone through production and didn't like production, so I didn't want to go through publishing. At the same time, some of the people that in our writers group, are trad and have very good reasons for being trad. And so that I like that you give both sides of it, and break it down for the folks who make the right, for them to make the right decisions with all the tools in their toolbox. And
yeah, I mean, that's the goal ultimately. Because there's our other tagline. I'm all about the taglines tonight. Our other tagline is, there's no single right way to produce, publish, or promote your book. Only the right way for you and your goals. Because there's no, like, in corporate America, there's like this path that you follow, and it's very laid out for you. You know what you have to achieve to reach that next promotion, at least to an extent, right? You have metrics that are handed down to you. And in the author world, that just does not happen. You have to figure it out on your own, and it's gonna swerve and curve and be all over the place, and that's okay.
It's a self-help book as well.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I mean, I remember you broke out kind of like a personality test for it a while back. Is that still going?
So we ended up having to shut down the online interactive version of it because the software got really expensive and we weren't seeing a whole lot of benefit coming out of it. We do still have a written version. I think it's on it's authorwheel.com/stuff is where we put all our freebie stuff, our little guides and templates and things that we put out. I can't remember if we have it up there right now. I'll double check and I'll try to make sure it is up there. But yes, it was like a printed like worksheet thing. Like, you answer ABC and, you add up your score and you get to figure out your personality. But we had 5 personality types that we came up with. So there was the artist, the bucket lister, the calling card writer, the dabbler, and the entrepreneur.
Well,
and so depending on where you fit on there, it was, the kind of book you were trying to write, what you were trying to do for your goals, what kind of skill sets you had already. And all of that thing was kind of taken into consideration. And then we had a bunch of blog posts and stuff that you could read to, keep moving forward.
Well, I need to pick your brain about it. Let me see if I can get it. I've got a Myers-Briggs with magic systems that I'm working on. So I need to, someone who has been in the trenches, I will have to see how that how that worked for you. It's not not a good sign that it's, it's not around anymore because the software, because I don't like paying for software either. So
Yeah, yeah. And
yeah.
especially 'cause we only had the one, like if you were like one of those companies that made quizzes all the time for different things, like it would be totally worth it.
Mhm.
But we only had the one quiz and we weren't making anything new with it. And it wasn't funneling into our website very well. It was like people already were visiting the website to get the quiz in the first place. So,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, um, but yeah, but it was fun to have. And I think it did help people kind of clarify their purpose, and what they were trying to do.
So is one of the things you're doing is turning pantsers into planners, or you work the other way around? What's the where do
I
you
don't
sit on that?
know. No, that's a really hard question because I'm a pretty hardcore pantser. I actually don't plot my novels, which I know blows people's mind every
I
time I say that.
do not believe you at all.
I know.
A blatant lie.
It's not. It's a partial lie because I do plot things out in my head and I usually know the midpoint and the end. But I can't do like a scene by scene or a super detailed plot because if I do, I actually end up losing interest in the story. The act of writing is my creative outlet. Everything else in my life is planned to the nth degree. But when it comes to the writing, I have to just follow the flow. But that being said, I actually am trying to do more plotting just in a shorter time frame. So like instead of plotting out the whole novel, plotting out a few chapters or a few scenes so that I know where I'm going for like the first act, for example. So if I can get that done and then I hit that act or that transition from act 1 to act 2 and then I go, okay, so what comes next? And then I can kind of explore that, plot out the next few chapters or at least the next chapter and like figure out what I'm doing for that, do a brain dump or something like that to figure that out. So I'm doing more short-term planning,
Mhm.
but I still can't do the long-term series stuff.
I
I know.
you pantsers, one of the other ones we know. Yeah, I just want to get in your head to crawl around for a little bit because it's such a foreign concept to me that and it's great that you can do it. I mean,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
yeah,
but is it though? Because sometimes I really wish I could do more plotting.
would you?
Um,
How much would you say? Do you think you do extra work because of the pantsing?
for sure.
Would you?
100%.
I mean, but would you say you add 10% more effort, 20%, not 100%?
Uh
That's just a personal question. I'm just wondering for my
yeah,
own.
no, I know. I think it's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I will say I have been known to cut 10,000 words and that feels painful and wasteful because I just went off on a tangent that stopped working. Um, so it's definitely more work. It's definitely slower. I think I'd write a lot faster if I could plot things out. But again, for me, it's that creative outlet, but it's also existing in the head of the character. So that's why I have to do that and pants it because if I try to plot, I mean, I'm looking at it from top down instead of inside the story. And
Right.
I have to be inside the story to make sure I know the right motivations and that I know the right what the character's feeling in the moment. Like I have to exist and embody that character.
I was gonna say you don't know what happens next because the character doesn't know what happens next.
Yeah, yeah. So I can think ahead a little bit, but not a full book.
That's really cool. I like that shift in perspective. That's really. I wish I had more character connection to do that with. Personally speaking,
Mm.
I personally manufacture it by taking Myers-Briggs as their characters to see how they would
Hmm.
react to situations, to think in their head, but I can't exist in their head like it sounds like you're doing. So I am
Yeah.
slightly envious.
Well, it's interesting. And I actually use the Enneagram personality types to especially for the secondary character. I mean, especially for the main character for sure. I always know their personality type, their Enneagram, which I find easier just because there's only 9, I guess, and they're a little bit more descriptive, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you ever done an Enneagram?
My mother was very much into that years ago. Like maybe the late 90s.
Yeah.
Because I
It's been
was,
around for thousands of years.
yeah,
Like
I
it's
mean,
not a new thing.
Kabbalistic, or am I just making stuff up? I want to say there's a Jewish something in it.
Yeah, I think it does come out of Jewish mysticism.
So,
So I don't know if it's Kabbalistic exactly, but it's
I just,
definitely ancient and it might even predate Judaism. I
ooh,
can't remember now. Greta did the history
yeah.
research on
But it
that.
doesn't matter because it made it to pop psychology and we
Yeah,
started using it, and
yeah,
when it
yeah,
became its own, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so it's kind of cool because it's like, you have for example, like they've named them now. Originally they were just numbers, but now they've kind of been popularized into names. So it's like, I'm an achiever type. I'm a 3-wing 4, an achiever with an individualist slant. And so like just with the word achiever, kind of what that is, right? Like some of
Mm.
the other ones are the loyalist, which is like the Cinderella character, or the reformer, right? And it's like you have these names, and for me that's a lot easier. Plus it's based on your core fears and motivations and desires rather. So like if you're an achiever, you feel fear, failure. Go figure, right? But loyalists seek out security. And what are so I'm like blanking now, but
It's okay.
anyway, yeah. So they all have kind of these core fears and motivations that drive them. And so you can more easily, at least for me versus Myers-Briggs, sort of inhabit that space and know like how they would react to different things, or what they're like if you're trying to create the conflict, what you know how to throw rocks at your characters when they're in the tree. You keep throwing rocks until like make it worse. You know how to make it worse because you know what they fear.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
I was so back to my normal questions I did for this. Where is the character in your personal? I want to move on to the branding after this, but before
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
just so you can pick it, the character world building plot. Where where is the process for you? Where do you start?
So I typically start with character, which and again, I suppose that kind of lends itself to why I have to be a pantser and inhabit that character, because that's typically where I start. But that character then dictates the world building. So, like with my latest series, the Rise of Lilith series, I knew I wanted to have this character who was a descendant of the ancestral first woman Lilith, and I took that myth and I twisted it. And that's another thing I like to do a lot in my books is take actual myths and then make them my own and twist them into sometimes unrecognizable forms, but they're this inspiration for my stories. So what I did with this series was I started with Lil, my main character, and I knew she was a bartender, and I knew she had this power that she didn't understand, and she could see the demon on your shoulder. And so I started with her, and then I was like, well, okay, then the world building has to happen next, because now I have to know, what is the magic that she's using? Where does she exist? Why did she choose to work at a tiki bar instead of a,
Great.
downtown, uh, you know, super fancy formal bar, right? Like, why is she where she is? And what is her backstory? And so I do all of that work first before I plot. Not that I really plot, but because usually by the time I'm done with that, I'm like, I got it right.
I mean that works. No, so that's
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense when you say it, and the way you write it. It makes sense. You start with the character and then extrapolate afterwards. And
Yeah.
all right, so and we've got a little of your backstory, because
Mm.
now that you exist as a character for all of us, can you tell us a little more about branding? Because that is one of the things that frightens us authors. And what are we supposed to be doing? And yeah, that, as I had mentioned earlier before we started the show, like genre is to me a lot of branding, because like if you're writing urban fantasy, it must be these following things, and epic
Mm-hmm.
fantasy has these, and it can extend to the author as well. Please
Mm-hmm.
expound.
Yeah. So, okay. So through the Author Wheel, we are actually running a free 7 days to your author brand mini course. So it's like one of those like email things. You get an email every day and it gives you like tasks. But our concept, I guess, or our perception on how we did and created our taglines is by looking, and this is going to sound crazy, totally crazy. What do you like to write and why? Right. So we actually start, because most writers are readers first. So we actually start with, what did you like to read when you were a kid? What did you like to read? Like, what were your foundational books and stories that you enjoyed? What did they have in common with each other? And usually that does come down to genre, really. We don't necessarily spell it out like that in this mini course, but we have a whole book on how to understand your genre as well, because that is fundamental to what we write. We all talk about like writing cross genre. You want to have, the next great American story and be totally unique. There's nothing totally unique. I'm sorry. It just doesn't exist. So what's unique is how you present it, right? So if you understand your genre, if you start with those things that you liked and with that foundation, then you can start narrowing it down and narrowing it down and narrowing it down to find you within that. So we start with your influences, and then we talk about what you're writing. So what books have you written? What stories did you start with? Like even the ones that never got published because they were too terrible to publish. And yes, we all have those. What do you write? What do those stories have in common? And what you'll start to find is that there are themes, there are characters, there are tropes, there are elements that you gravitate to as a person, right? Then once you understand that, you can look at what your goals are and what you're trying to produce. And that's what the author mission statement is. So it's a longer thing that's really mostly just for you as the writer to kind of understand what you're doing. So like I write strong female heroines who have to figure out where their place in the world, and they have to, and they cross through imaginary worlds, right? There, it's portal fantasy. All my books have I didn't know this until recently, like within the last couple of years. I write portal fantasy. All my books, every single one, the characters cross between realms. They cross between Earth and other magical places. And in the case of my recent one, she's a bartender in Laguna Beach who travels to the realm of the gods, the Aether, right? Like that's part of who I am as a writer. And then the tricky part, which does take more time and takes more testing, and you have to get critique on it, which is sometimes challenging. We don't always like to be critiqued, but is to distill all of that information down into a single sentence and into a single tagline that you can then print on a t-shirt and sell to readers. And that's what escape into myth, magic, and mayhem is for me, because escape is the portal. That's the traveling. That's the imaginary world that I love to visit, right? That's the escape. That's also the experience that I want to provide for my readers. So there's like a lot of layers of meaning there. And then I always use myth. Every book has myths that I've twisted and I've researched, and then I make them my own. They all have mayhem. They're action-oriented books with battles and fights and knives. They all have knives. And they all have magic, right? Like they're fantasy. So magic is integral to my stories as well. So once you know all those things about your influences from when you were a kid, through what you like to write, through what you're trying to produce as an author, bring it all together into that single sentence. And then that leads you into the rest of the branding. So whether it's covers, whether it's, your website design, that kind of a thing. Once you have that tagline and that core bit, everything else gets a lot easier.
That is actually exceedingly fascinating. Like, you were telling the story, and of course, I immediately started thinking about me. It was like, what was my, because that's what we all do on Zoom meetings, right? Is someone's talking, you're thinking about yourself. But no, I mean, like that was absolutely fascinating. It was like taking it, distilling it down. What is your thing? And this is me. This is me. This is me in 8 words. That is fascinating. Like, I've not thought about doing that for myself, and obviously I need to start thinking about doing that for myself, because once you know what you're offering, then you can offer it better. And wow, I
Yeah.
am thoroughly
So
impressed.
you can go to authorwheel.com/stuff and join our course.
I think
It's
I'm doing
free,
well.
by the
That
way.
is, yeah, that is great. Yeah, no, yeah, like, when you talk about distilling it, like I was, and there's nothing new. I was thinking about, I had a class on sonnets, and a sonnet is this: these 14 lines, they rhyme like this is how it sounds, and you show your ability and how well you write a sonnet, like, and how well you take those existing structures, and you make it your own. You make the thing your own. You make that genre your own, and yeah, and you are showing the creativity of self in knowing what you're writing and then making it your own. And that's really,
Yeah.
I like that concept and where you're coming from on that.
Well, and that kind of goes back to understanding your genre as well. Like, once you get the branding and all of that is obviously, in my opinion, necessary. But part of that is this understanding genre, because we always worry, I think, especially when we're first starting out, that, oh, it has to be different. I don't want to write like my favorite authors. I don't want to be influenced so much that I'm going to plagiarize or steal their story. It's got to be totally new. But the reality,
And when you say it has to be totally new, you have to fluff your hair back.
yes,
Like,
you do.
no one has ever done the amazing
No,
things that I am about to do. I am going to lay it on you.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, once you have those boundaries, it actually makes the writing, in my opinion, a lot more interesting and fun. That's why I think that's part of the reason why I like to use ancient myths and twist them, because they give you that inspiration, they give you that structure, and you've already got some of the elements in mind, and then you twist it and you make it your own, right? Like, but that's what genre is too. It's like, okay, if you're going to have a magic sword, and you're writing epic fantasy, and you know that you're going to have these political conflicts and multi-point of view characters, okay, you've got now boundaries that you can play with. It's like having a sandbox and not being on the beach, right? Like, you can play with all these things, and it gives you that structure that you need to really have more fun, maybe.
I honestly
You're
think
not worried
that,
about being eaten by a shark.
I think constraints actually make you be more creative.
Yeah.
And some of my Tarantino, one of my, the reasons I got into film in the first place, was constrained with Reservoir Dogs and made a very good film, and then became unconstrained and are not as enjoyable films since then. So yes, I very much believe in the sandbox of one's own making, right? That
Right.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Right. Yeah. And my sandbox is going to be different than your sandbox, even if we write the same genre,
yeah.
subgenre.
That
Yeah.
that's a very neat way to think about it. And all right, so what was the first world you remember building?
The first world. Oh, well, I don't know if it's the first one, but it's the first one I finished, first novel I finished. And it was
That's a,
terrible. And actually, it was terrible because the world building was terrible. Now that I think about it more carefully.
we'll start with, what age were you?
So actually, I didn't really start writing until I was an adult. So I didn't, at least not creative writing. So it was probably 2000. Well, I finished it in like 2009, maybe 2010. Yeah, I'm
Uh,
sorry, the jaw, like,
no, no,
I
no.
can't
It's
remember.
yeah. You mean last week? That was last week. What are you talking about?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, I was probably what, 25-ish, 26, 27. I don't know. I can't do math. It's not my strong suit, despite being a business major and
It's
taking all
business.
those
No,
classes.
no, yeah.
I like calculators and spreadsheets. I don't like doing math. Anyway, um, yeah, so it was a book, and actually that's why it failed, now that I'm really thinking about it. Because I didn't do enough world building or enough. I tried to throw everything I loved into the same book. So it was like werewolves and witches and magic that had no base, like no structure around it. Like, I had no concept of what a magic system should really be or look like. I just was like, I like magic. Let's make it magical. So, but the world, it was loosely based. Well, actually, it wasn't loosely based. It was set in Colorado in the mountains. And these werewolves were like miners. And they'd made all their money mining gold and silver in Colorado. And but they had the secret society. And yeah, there was not enough world building there for me to actually create a story that made sense. So when I wrote the story, I got to the end and I finished the book, but it's sitting in a drawer and it's never coming out. Because it was like there was no structure. There was no thread holding it all together. There was no fabric of reality other than the fact that it was set in Colorado that made any kind of sense for these characters to be existing in. I hadn't yet learned that, characters exist in a place and a time and they have rules and you have to follow those rules. I didn't get that.
Have,
So,
have you
yeah.
ever cannibalized anything from that idea?
Not intentionally, probably subconsciously. I think it's the fundamental premise was very, I mean, like most things when you're first starting out with any kind of craft, it was very juvenile, right? Like there was like a brother and a sister and they were twins and they traveled up to the mountains and they got trapped and they, had to fight their way free and one of them got bit. And like it was like there were a lot of problems with it. But that being said, elements of it, as far as, again, knowing what I like and why I like it and the kinds of stories that I enjoy and the writing style that I enjoy, that all came from that first finished novel. I had plenty of others that I didn't finish before that,
I
but
don't know, it's interesting that it was an adult story, and like some of the others are like, oh, I was in high school, I was
yeah.
elementary, like no, I was an adult, and
No, and that's the thing, right? So in elementary and high school, I didn't think I was good at creative writing, so I didn't do it, right? Like
Mhm.
I like those were the things, the assignments in class, in my English classes, that were always the hardest for me. And I was always like, oh, I'm just not good. It's just I'm just terrible. I can't do this, right? And so I would finish the assignment, but that would be about it. Um but as an adult, when I was working this corporate job, right, it was a number crunching spreadsheet type job. And I had an hour commute by train. And I actually started out, I was reading. I've always been a voracious reader. I've loved reading and escaping into these stories. And, Anne McCaffrey and Anne Rice and Laurel K. Hamilton. I mean, these were my early inspirations. But because I had an hour commute, I was tearing through like a book a day. Like it was nuts. And this is before the Kindle, so they weren't cheap. So I finally decided I needed to start writing and slow myself down and try my hand at this and see if I could do it. And then it stuck.
So it was a financial decision.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so last question.
Yeah.
What is the one piece of advice you wish you had when you started out? If you could hand it to yourself now, that 20-year-old making that Colorado werewolf town, what would it be?
Um, I think the thing that I've struggled with the most has been that this job isn't linear. That you start one thing and you think you're doing everything right, and you may never sell a book, or you might sell 1 million and you have no way of knowing which books are necessarily going to hit, or what's going to work, what marketing techniques are going to work or not. And I think when I started, I expected, oh, well, I'll publish a book and yeah, it might not do well, but then I'll publish the next one and it'll do better. And then I'll publish the next one and it's going to do better. And then on the next, and just, it's just, it's like you start getting the chart. I like charts.
I know, but my wife is in statistics and creating evaluation and that kind of thing. And so our running gag is, well, it's linear, right? It's always linear,
It's
right?
always linear.
It's
Yeah.
always linear. Yeah.
No, it's not. Especially this job. Like I was saying before, it's like when you're work a corporate job, you know what you have to do to get promoted or take that next level. Like, you know what the expectations are, you know your tasks that you have to do each day. Even if it's a very creative job, you still know your things that you have to do. But when you're running your own business and creative business to boot, and you're your own boss, and you're learning everything for the first time, and you're trying to figure it out, and everything's changing all the time, and what worked yesterday might not work tomorrow, and you're constantly having to pivot. It's just not linear. um so I think I've struggled with that a lot over the years, and I've finally had to flip my mindset so that that's what makes it fun now, is this idea of like, no matter how good or bad you do, it can always be better or worse tomorrow. And you just have to keep rolling with it, and you just have to keep trying, and you have to keep at it, keep trying new things, and it's challenging, and I'm always learning, and I'm always changing and doing new things. And that's cool, right? Like, how many people get to say that for their job? Like, every day is what I make of it, and I get to pick the tasks I do and what's important to me today and tomorrow and next year, you know.
Just authors and maybe sociopaths and presidents, probably. Yeah.
Probably, yeah, yeah. Well, and
They
sometimes
could
the
not mutually exclusive.
no, I was about to say.
Thank you, Megan,
Yeah.
so much for coming on, and let us know where we can find you.
Absolutely. So on the fiction side of things, my fantasy, I'm at meganhaskell.com, and I do sell direct. So you can get ebooks, paperbacks, signed paperbacks, as well as a few of my titles are in audio on my website. I'm also wide, so on all the various platforms and distribution channels, etc. Whatever your favorite retailer is, you can find me there, Megan Haskell. And then I'm on Facebook and Instagram as Megan Haskell Author. And on the nonfiction side of things, I'm at authorwheel.com. And if you wanted to do the 7 days to your author brand mini course, which is a really long title, but it was very descriptive, and you can find that at authorwheel.com/stuff.
Cool. Thank you so much. I am definitely checking that one out. And that is not hyperbole. That is like, I really don't know what my brand is. What is my brand? And well, not selling well, I'll tell you that. So I'm going to be checking that one out. And thank you so much for being on the show. And
Anytime. It's
yeah.
fun.